Good day. I am Paco Saavedra, and with my good friend Alvaro Cordero, we will tackle what we believe are the first and second most important scenes in the Shakespeare's tragedy Macbeth. To start things off, we believe that the most important scene in Macbeth is Act 2, Scene 2. So the synopsis of the scene by Folger's Shakespeare Library goes as follows. Lady Macbeth waits anxiously for Macbeth to return from killing Duncan. When Macbeth enters, he is horrified by what he has done. He has brought with him the daggers that he used on Duncan, instead of leaving them in the room with Duncan's servants as Lady Macbeth had planned. When he finds himself incapable of returning the daggers, Lady Macbeth does so. She returns to find Macbeth still paralyzed with horror and urges him to put on his gown and wash the blood from his hands.
Since the act is very long, we will break down the scene into 5 parts, and it is as it follows. The first part is Lady Macbeth waiting for Macbeth. Second part is Macbeth finally meeting with Lady Macbeth. Third part is Macbeth conversing with Lady Macbeth about what happened during the murder. Fourth part is Lady Macbeth leaving with the daggers. And the fifth part is when the two hear knocking and decide to leave. With this, we will point out the language Shakespeare used in each part, as well as talk about other techniques used.
Aesthetically speaking, and not in a literary sense, Shakespeare leaves a word or even a phrase to take up a whole line. This is thematic deviation. This is because an iambic pentameter is present, as well as it gives us a peek into the mental state of Lady Macbeth. This is because if you are drunk, or at least have taken alcohol, you speak like you have a broken rhythm. Her mental state is given further context as she gets surprised by Macbeth coming.
In line 13, alliteration is used as there is a repetition of the sound a. Alack, I am afraid they have awaked. Moreover, in line 16, the sound of e. He could not miss M had he not resembled.
These sets of lines is literally a conversation between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth while Macbeth is walking down the stairs. However, the way it is written reveals a more interesting insight regarding these lines. As you can see, it is written like a staircase going down. It symbolizes the literal of Macbeth going down the stairs, and at the same time, it mirrors the weight of Macbeth's guilt, which is dragging his thoughts downwards. And to be honest, I was very surprised when I learned about this. It shows that Shakespeare can use his way of writing outside his usage of words to convey a strong message, which is completely mind-blowing to me to see how advanced he thinks.
In this scene, the couple talk with each other in brief full sentences. This gives us a peek into their mental states. Macbeth, having just killed the king, just replies. Lady Macbeth, having been spooked by her husband, just questions and replies as well. The couple are clearly both on edge in this scene.
The repetition of Amen, God bless us, and sleep no more foregrounds Macbeth's mental state. To think about it, if you're anxious about something, you'll be spiraling down into the same thought again and again, which is seen by this said repetition. It gives us a sense of the gravity of his guilt in a subtle yet effective way.
All throughout this part, metric deviation is present. Macbeth's speech often breaks from regular iambic parameter because the irregular rhythm tells us that he has psychological disturbance, and he simply cannot process the murder calmly. In line 57, parallelism is present as the repetition in its structure highlights Macbeth's fractured psyche and internal torment for killing King Duncan.
Macbeth's 3 lines all end with periods. This stresses his emotion towards his deed. It uses linguistic deviation as the sudden pauses in Macbeth's lines convey the intensity in his speech. Like someone who is stern in their speaking, enunciating the full stops and periods may come off as striking. So if I were to read the lines for Macbeth, I would read it as, I'll go no more. I'm afraid to think what I have done. Look on again, I dare not. Symbolism was also used here in the context of blood, where in the line, will all great Neptune's oceans wash this blood clean from my hand, which is used to talk about Macbeth's inescapable guilt. His question is like asking himself if there's anything in this world that will wash away the guilt given from his past actions.
Wake, Duncan, with thy knocking. I would thou couldst. The abruptness of Wake, Duncan and I would thou couldst disrupts the rhythm, emphasizing Macbeth's regret and agitation. The line deviates from the typical unstressed and stressed pattern of the iambic parameter. Overall, Shakespeare's use of language in this scene helps us understand the psychological state of Macbeth. The reason for this scene being so important is because this is the psychological turning point of Macbeth. It is also where Lady Macbeth's descent to madness begins. The scene is so important because the psychological state of Macbeth makes him decide and do more things down the line. In this scene, Lady Macbeth is also rather still and a pretty stable demeanor, but this scene makes her start to also have her descent into madness. The language that Shakespeare used really delivered to the audience the noticeable shift in the psyche of Macbeth. The irregularities in Macbeth's lines reflect his inner confusion, emphasizing his guilt, paranoia, and inability to maintain composure. Shakespeare's broken rhythms and other poetic devices convey the psychological state of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth after the murder. The deviation present when Macbeth speaks contrasts with Lady Macbeth's controlled regular speech earlier in the scene, highlighting their differing psychological states. For us, Act 3, Scene 4 is the second most important scene. In this scene, we basically see how Macbeth goes crazy in front of his guests in the banquet after his men told him that the murder of Banquo was successful. Act 3, Scene 4 is very important as it serves as the starting point of Macbeth's insanity. Not only that, but the skepticism of the other people in his ability to be a king. There is also a shift in the relationship and dynamic of the couple because of the happenings in this scene. This scene tells us that the unstable psychological state of Macbeth in Act 2, Scene 2 has developed to become insanity. And so did the psychological state of Lady Macbeth. This is because of her paranoia of being caught. The two deaths, or rather two murders done by Macbeth, are the most important scenes in the whole story. The murder of Duncan is more important than that of Banquo's because the latter's murder is somewhat a follow-up to the first. The second murder would have never been committed if the first hadn't happened. Macbeth's psyche degradates after the first murder, so much so he decides to kill Banquo as well. If the murder of King Duncan is point A, its effects to Macbeth is what made Macbeth steer into point B, which is the murder of Banquo. The murder of Banquo is what precedes, therefore it is far less important than the main murder. Thus, that is why we believe Act 2, Scene 2 is more important than Act 3, Scene 4. For us, what makes an important scene is its integralness to the story, meaning that if the scene never happened, the story wouldn't have gone in the direction it did. That is why for the two of us, the two murders were the most important scenes in the story. The murder of King Duncan broke the psyche of Macbeth, while the murder of Banquo showed to many people Macbeth's insanity since killing two really important characters. The story wouldn't have played out how it did if the two murders were never committed. That is why for a scene to be important, it must be so integral that it shifts or develops the story. Reading Macbeth has helped Paco and I reflect on our lives as athletes and as students, making us think of the things we are willing to do to get to the top, whether certain things are worth sacrificing for our goal. Not necessarily our friends, but something that is also very important, our time and effort. As student athletes, we have to really be strict with our time management to ensure that we are both successful in both areas. Reading Macbeth has made us reflect on the importance of sacrificing the proper things and not taking shortcuts to reach our goals.
Thank you for listening in to our podcast type video. Hopefully you understand why we feel that these two scenes are the most important in Macbeth and why Shakespearean language is seen in these scenes. So thank you and have a great day.